What's up, everybody? I'm Elliott from Render.com, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about daily projects, what I think about them, why I think they're good, how they could potentially be bad even, as well as sharing with you some of the daily projects that I've done. Yeah, just talking through kind of some of my thoughts around that. Part of the reason that I wanted to do this video is because the 36 Days of Type challenge was coming up in just a little bit less than a week, and wanted to maybe encourage some people to give it a shot, but also talk about some maybe strategies for navigating something like that. And yeah, just kind of give thoughts on the situation. If you're not familiar with a daily project, it's about what it sounds like in that pretty much every day you create a piece of work. And this doesn't just apply to 3D art. Of course, this can be anything. Hopefully brushing your teeth is a daily project you've been doing for a while now. But yeah, one of the really popular people who does dailies is this guy named Mike Winkleman. You probably know him better as Beeple. He's been doing dailies for a very long time, and obviously it's paid off for him. But of course, not everybody's necessarily going to do a daily for thousands of days like he has. So yeah, a daily project is a project you do every day, and you really just have to do the project every day. But typically with it, and maybe where you've seen dailies before, is you would, after you finish the daily, you post that work on social media. A lot of times Instagram is a very popular place for something like this. So you don't have to post the work, but there's some reasons that I'll get into why I think it is good to post the work on somewhere like Instagram, which, by the way, follow. One way, I'm going to throw my little handle up there. Follow me on Instagram if you aren't already. But yeah, you don't have to post it, but that's kind of one of the things people typically do with a daily. And in the case of this 36 Days of Type challenge that's coming up, it's, if you want to participate with the rest of the people in the daily, then you do need to post your work. And then of course, they can repost it. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself talking about the kind of the reasons for or against the daily. And at the end of this video, I'm going to walk you through in a little bit more detail the 36 Days of Type project I did 2 years ago, where I made a lot of I called it tiny architecture. Basically, yeah, I took the letter forms and kind of turned them into dwellings of one sort or another. So I just want to show you just a little bit of a sneak peek into the file that I set up for that and kind of how that helped me, and then just walk through some similarities and just do a little bit more of a deep dive on how that project worked, maybe a little bit about how long I spent on it. And if you haven't seen it yet, there's a lot of live streams from when I was actually doing that project on my channel already, so be sure to check those out. So the next thing I want to talk about is why I believe doing a daily project is a good thing. So I think first and foremost, at least for someone like me, one of the benefits of doing a daily project is that you have a deadline. I'm really big on finishing work. It's really easy, especially when you're starting off with 3D or really any creative endeavor, to keep going. And by having set deadlines where you're working on something and then deciding it's done is really helpful to keep yourself moving forward and not get too hung up on any one thing. So for me, the idea that by doing a project every day means that I'm going to start a project and finish it every day is very helpful for me. So having a deadline is a big advantage to a daily project. So kind of along those lines, in terms of creating a piece every day, is that it takes a little bit of the seriousness out of the work. So if you're only going to be spending a few hours, well, I mean, technically you could be spending 24 hours per daily, but I would not recommend that. Remember, you got to save time to brush your teeth. It takes away some of the seriousness of the work. So you only have a set amount of time. There's low expectations for maybe what you're going to produce. You don't feel like it has to be this masterpiece. And when you tag something with #daily, for the most part, people would be impressed. Wow, you made this in a day. But the fact that a daily project is something you're just doing in a short amount of time and putting the results out there takes a lot of the pressure of posting the work and sharing it with people, because people know it's not something that you spent a long time with. And if they're familiar with the term daily, they'll see that and know that, oh, it's something that you did in a short period of time and not necessarily something you're trying to show off as the best work you've ever done. So the next good thing about a daily, in my opinion, is that it produces a volume of work. So once again, this might not be your best work ever, but by doing these projects every day for any period of time, even if it's just a week or something like that, you are producing a volume of work. And you might actually find that some of those daily projects you could turn into larger projects if you like the way something went. But yeah, it just, as you're doing a daily project, you're every day producing one more piece of work. So over time, you're able to produce produce a pretty large body of work. Whereas if you were just doing, one larger project at a time, because especially in somewhere like Instagram, a lot of times it boils down to just a single square where that image is posted. So by doing this project every single day, you're able to build up more of those squares essentially. And it's not just about filling your feed, but it does produce a body of work that's something easy to look back on and see that it feels good to complete a lot of work, and just to be able to look back at each project you did over those days and see, wow, I did a lot of work, versus just one thing where maybe you just end with, a single animation or a single image. In this case, you're ending with many single images or animations. So producing that volume of work is really good, and not just to have that for you to look back on, but of course you're developing your skills as you do it. Now, in line with establishing those skills and kind of flexing your creative muscles in one way or another, I think a really good way to tackle a daily project is to kind of pick what area in particular you want to focus on. So with the daily project, maybe you're not starting with a clean slate every day, but you have sort of a theme, or in the case of 36 Days of Type, that each day it's going to be a letter form. So you're able to kind of pick exactly what you want to work on. Maybe the letter forms are very simple every day, but you're really focusing on the lighting or something like that. So you can kind of use a daily as a way to hone in a particular skill. Whereas, if you're doing a larger project, that may only be one piece of it, but with a daily, you can kind of block out the other parts of a project, probably not completely, but you can kind of pick certain areas to focus on and do that one after another to really develop your skills in a certain area. So the next few points are a little bit more social media centric. And so the first one I'll talk about is, it's kind of it's smoke and mirrors, the Instagram algorithm, but it does seem to be that when you post work regularly, and doing a daily would obviously be pretty regularly, it seems like the algorithm tends to kind of favor your posts, because when you're posting regularly, they want to push more people to that content because they know, oh, this is a creator that you can expect a certain amount from. And again, I've never tracked this very closely, but I do typically notice that when I'm doing a daily project, during that time, my engagement is significantly higher than if you're just posting, maybe one post every few weeks or something like that. So take those little bits about the algorithm with a grain of salt, but I can assure you that, algorithm aside, posting more often is obviously going to drive more people to your social media pages. And if that's something you're trying to do, grow those pages, and there are advantages to that, then by posting daily, you're definitely going to have a little bit of a bump maybe in engagement and just general people visiting your work. Now, also along the lines of Instagram in particular, as you're doing a daily project, and especially if you can kind of maintain some consistency, which I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's a benefit, you can, when someone visits your page, they're going to see kind of this nice aligning, all these matching posts, and it just looks nice. So when someone comes to your page, it's automatically, in my opinion, sort of an aesthetically pleasing thing. People like to come to a page and see consistency with what's being posted, not just the content itself, but just kind of the general feel. Like as soon as someone clicks on your profile, does it look like this nice, organized, curated thing, which is something you might get with a daily, or is it just kind of scattered all over the place? Some pictures of your cat, some pictures of your mom, and some pictures of your 3D work. And the last thing I'll talk about is that even though you're producing just one small piece of work every day for a period of time, you can ultimately turn that into maybe a larger project. If you're familiar with the social media network Behance, a lot of times people will collect their everydays from a certain period of time and share them all as one larger project. So maybe you wouldn't share one image as a portfolio piece or a project on a website like Behance, but when you tie them all together, it does kind of resemble a larger body of work, especially if those fit together. Then it can be really nice to take a look back and see all those projects in one place and turn what was a bunch of fragmented projects into something much larger. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about what I think it takes to be successful with a daily project. So first of all, don't try to do a daily project when you have a lot going on. I know that it sounds really fun to produce a piece of work every day and it's a good challenge, but if there's too much going on in your life or you're just not going to be able to keep up with it, then it could end up being a little bit disheartening in the long run if you find that you're not able to have the time to work on something like that. So if you have a lot of freelance work going on or just other things in your life life, maybe you're trying to plan a wedding, then you don't want to let the daily project infringe on your already hectic life. So make sure that you've got some time set aside you think that you can commit to doing a daily project. And now this doesn't have to be a ton of time. And some people are probably only spending, could be even just 5 minutes on the projects per day. But in my case, I usually like to have at least an hour if I'm going to be doing a daily project to focus on that project in particular. But again, that depends on exactly what you have planned for your project and how in depth you want things to be, how much time you need to spend on it. So the next little point is just to commit to it. It's really scary to kind of start one like that, but if you're going to do it, just make the decision, commit to it, make sure you've got that time set aside. And the further you get into the project, the more those posts start to accumulate, the more committed you will be to it. You know, if you're trying to do 36 posts and by the time you get to 30, just seeing all those previous posts all lined up is going to be the encouragement you need to get through those last few days. Now, also along the lines of social media, and especially with the 36 days of type project in particular, when you're working on that daily project, everyone else is also on the same day at the same time in most cases, unless you start to slip a little behind, which I have before. But it's a really good opportunity to connect with other people that are working on the project together, build a little bit of camaraderie, and kind of each day as those new letters get done, you're able to look at everybody else's work. People can look at the hashtag and see what you're working on. And of course, there is a chance that their main page might repost your work. And of course, that's an opportunity to get even more eyes on your page and your work. So the next thing in terms of being successful with a daily project is to make some decisions about what you're going to be doing and try not to stray too far from those. So of course, some people who do daily projects are all over the place, but in my opinion, it's really good to either focus on a particular skill you want to work on or just try to generally have some variables set in stone. So of course, with the 36 days of type project, then you know each day your post is going to have something to do with a letter form. But if you look at some of my posts, you could kind of, like if you lined up all my daily projects and you kind of scattered them, you'd be able to piece them together because there's a lot of consistency between each one. You know, in my case, a lot of times that looks like using the same HDRI in every one, using very similar lighting. Of course, the topics are typically very similar. I'll have a few materials set up and only use those. Things like that can really help to give you that visual consistency. But even more importantly than that, they allow you to jump into the project with a few decisions already decided, and then you can just work on the particular things you want to work on, whether that's, just building creative things or, working on your lighting, animation, anything like that. It's helpful to just have some consistency in terms of not having to make so many decisions, not having to stare at a blank screen every time you open up a project to start the next day. Next little tip I'll say is to keep things organized. So it's really easy, especially when you're doing, upwards of 10, 20, 30, even more posts maybe. It can be very frustrating as that, if you're keeping everything in one folder, it can be a little bit frustrating to have all those things start to build up, especially if you're doing a lot of iterations or maybe test renders with each daily project. So it's a good idea to maybe for each day have its own folder, and then depending on how complex things are getting, maybe subfolders. But for me, at least with the 36 days of type project that I did, I just basically had a folder for each day, and then in each folder there was the 3D file. Sometimes there were one or two of them if I would save at a certain point, and then I would have the frames in the case of an animation, and then maybe there'd be a folder for test renders, and then in the main hierarchy of the folder I would usually have the final post, whether it's just a still or an animation, so that if I need to go back I can access those. And in the case of a project where it gets maybe past 10 days or so, it's not a bad idea to take the final piece from each day and put it into another folder on its own. This can help a lot when you're cataloging things later down the line, or if you need to quickly refer back to a post. You don't have to go digging into that actual post folder, but you can just find it kind of in some larger folder where everything is organized. And you can call that folder like finals or something like that. Another thing I'll recommend in terms of, efficiency is to consider using a cloud rendering service rather than rendering on your own computer, especially if you're doing an animation. Now, this is not sponsored, but I've been using the service Render.St for a long time. If you're interested in trying out some cloud rendering, I've left my little affiliate link in the description. All that's going to do is just give me some free days of rendering if you end up signing up. So I won't talk much more about that, but especially in the case of a daily project, if for some reason there's some glitch or error and you're rendering an animation especially, you don't want to offset your schedule because you had to re-render something and your computer's tied up. So that's one reason why you might want to give that a shot. In the case of still rendering, probably not as big of a deal. Now, also in terms of file organization, I would also recommend that maybe you have, if you are keeping some relative consistencies between your projects, instead of rebuilding the file from scratch each time and kind of recreating those matching materials, definitely a good idea to save kind of a starter file that every time you're starting your new daily project, you open that file up and it already has the materials, lighting, HDRI. That's all kind of just automatically loaded in there so that you can just get to work on the part that your daily is focusing on, whether that be lighting, design, anything like that. And the last thing I'll say is don't be afraid to cheat on a daily project. I know you're supposed to do one every day, and if you're posting them, I would advise just posting them one a day, but it's okay if you just get a few days ahead. Sometimes when I've been working on daily projects, I know that I have, maybe a big weekend coming up, or I'm even going to be out of town. So if I'm feeling in a groove, sometimes I'll just kind of work a day or two ahead. I wouldn't try to bust out, 30 posts in a single day. That might kind of take away from the point, but there's definitely been times where, I'm feeling in a groove. I want to get a little bit ahead, and maybe I'll work on 2 or 3 days ahead so that I can take a break for the next few days. But when it comes to actually posting those things, I can stay right on schedule. Now I'll talk briefly too about maybe some downsides to doing a daily, which I think this is something that Andrew Price touched on one time, which is that if all you're doing with a daily project is just trying to get something out every day, and you're just rushing to get it done, and the work quality is suffering, then that's maybe not something that you should be focusing on. It's okay if it happens here and there where maybe you got a little bit behind and you kind of just need to get the project finished for the day. It's okay if you maybe, don't put as much effort into it. But if you find that you're putting in minimal effort just to get the thing done, then you're probably not really helping yourself in the long run, because the quality of work is going to suffer maybe a little bit. And it's obviously added stress if you don't have the time to be working on it in the first place. So I've been kind of showing some of my dailies on the side as I've been talking here, but what I want to do now is just dive maybe briefly into each one of those projects, and then we'll dive even a little deeper into my 36 Days of Type project that I did 2 years ago that I think went really well. I was really happy with how it turned out. So here is my Instagram page, and in order to not seem so vain, I'm just going to quickly walk you through some of my daily projects and point out a few of those things in regards to consistency, and just kind of as an example of what it takes, in my opinion, to have a good, successful daily project. So my first daily project here is my wife, Caitlin. It's been a long time, many years, trying to get her to love me, and it finally worked out. We're married now, but that's not actually what we're here to look at. So this is the most recent daily project I did, and again, in terms of consistency, you can kind of see how these posts all fit together on the page. They all have these similar Dirk kind of pillar element. They all have this one lamp in each one of them. And then of course they're all in the same lighting with the same set of materials, and things like that really helps to allow me to focus on the actual design of these little architectural pieces, and not so much, what the lighting is going to be and what the materials I'm going to use are going to be. So scrolling down further, this is actually just a single project, but you can see that it does kind of all match together. And that's something I do with a larger project I work on. I will try to spread it out over a few posts, so that can kind of have the appearance of a daily, but it's not that. So the next one is my 36 Days of Type, which I called the 9 Days of Type because I did not finish. So you've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. And with each of these, again, very similar material palette. I worked a little bit with the background on each one, and then obviously the design of the seating element was different in each. But for the most part, you can tell that they all look the same. And this extends, in this case, even down to the animation. So they all, if you look at them, have this exact same camera motion. The materials are obviously all the same. And there's even some lighting animation in there as well, and it's just consistent between the posts. So these stand on their own with a lot of little details, but I'm not actually having to rebuild those details every single time. So if we come a little further down here, this is the larger project I was talking about. Definitely encourage you to check out all these posts individually if you're interested. And then, like I mentioned, there are some live streams on my channel where I go into of course detail on how some of them were made from start to finish. But we'll talk a little bit more about those later. So my next daily project that I did before that were these boxes, and these three up here were actually part of it, but you can see with the inconsistency, they didn't really line up as well as they did with these ones, which are same materials, sort of this gloss effect where all I had to do was change the image and the shape of the box. And I actually kept the shape of the box the same for 3 in a row. So 1, 2, and 3 have the same box, 4, 5, and 6 have the same box, 7, 8, and 9 have the same box. And then, the lighting is the same. The animation was something I focused on here. But the lighting is the same, the materials are the same. And yeah, with this project in particular, animation was the focus, just trying to come up with sort of creative ways to animate these boxes. So coming a little further down the line, this is sort of a 3-day daily. This was just experimenting with, some really cool shaders. This wasn't really intended to be a daily project, but, I figured why not render out a few different cool car models I could get my hands on. So this is another daily project. They don't all fit together super well here, but I was just kind of trying to create these abstract blobs, and just in general you can tell that there's a little bit of theme between these pieces. So I was really into dailies at this point, I suppose. This was another one I did sort of a little bit more type focused. I did a little bit of editing. You can see there's kind of these little details that go around the image, and that's just something that I did in Photoshop and laid on top. But these were just experiments with some letter forms and then lighting and a color palette. And that kind of built off of this previous project, which was another daily-ish project where I was sort of building out this kind of dream office space. This wasn't an actual architecture project, but architecture obviously is something that I'm very interested in. So with this project, I was just trying out some different colorways, trying some different angles, and kind of building on this one singular idea and color palette. So if we come further down, we have, I would say the first daily project I really did was this orange animations project. Now I called it 21 orange animations on Behance, but I didn't really know how many I would do at first. I just kind of had this idea to make these little interface inspired animations. I did a couple, kept going, and then I decided, okay, I think 21 would be a good stopping point. So I just kind of went until I got tired of it. And it was a really fun way to build up some animation skills, which was the main focus here. Obviously materials, again, very limited palette. And yeah, just working on creating interesting shapes, all having this ball theme. And then of course this orangish color. So that was a fun one. And that one definitely did kickstart some things for me in terms of following. I think when I was posting these, I got a lot of attention. That was kind of some of the first growth I really saw on Instagram. So I have some other things here, some silly animations that were, I wouldn't necessarily call them daily. I wonder if it doesn't look like I tagged them daily. But yeah, these all kind of have a similar material. And in general, you can see that, even if you don't want to call the project a daily, sometimes it's fun to just take one idea and make multiple things out of it rather than trying to come up with something completely novel every time. So that's about it for those. Let's now take a little bit of a deeper look into this 36 days of type challenge, where I'll just break down my file a little bit and tell you about some of the things inside that file that helped me get started each day I was working on a new letter. So here I am in the project folder for this 36 days of type challenge that I did 2 years ago. And what I want to do is just show you kind of a little bit deeper into things you can do to make a daily project a little bit easier on yourself. So you can see here, I have a folder for basically every letter and number. And then within that folder, I have a Blender file and then the After Effects file where it was all kind of rendered together. And then of course, all the frames in there. And if you look in really any of these files, you'll see basically the same structure where there's just, in the case of the P, for example, there's maybe a test render in there where I was checking things out. And then in this one, I did a live stream. So I've got my, YouTube thumbnail in there as well. But for the most part, they're really simple. They've just got, the Blender file and then any kind of associated things with them so I can find them all easily. And then there's a couple folders like the mega comp is what I used to put together the video that's on my channel that goes through all those. And then, I even have this template folder where you could see there's this little frame kind of around each animation. So that was something I just put together in Illustrator, slapped on top at the end. And again, that's all just so that, you have all these little details in your project if someone just sees one of the posts, but you know that you're not spending too much time actually working on each one of those at any given time. So also in this template folder, I have a base file. And that's one thing I mentioned is really helpful when you're starting out, is to have some type of file that that you can start with so that a lot of things are already decided for you. So let's go ahead and open that up and I'll just show you briefly how that's set up. So you can see here that it doesn't, look like much on its own, but it's kind of got all the elements I need in here. So there's some lighting already set up. There's an HDRI in here. And then I even have some materials already set up. And if you remember from the post, if you've kind of looked at them before, you'll notice that each one kind of has this rotating cube that shows the gradient that I did throughout the course of the project. You can see they started at kind of like a pink color and then they went up to sort of a yellow color. And that was just kind of a fun thing since I knew I was going to be doing all these posts. I was like, well, I might as well do something cool across them so that they're like even cooler when they're all put together. So if we go back into this file, you'll see that, I just have basically a line here with a skin modifier on it so that I could use that to make holes and things like that. I have the little number that I could just change every day I needed to. I could type whatever I wanted to on that. Hey, YouTube. And that's just automatically all set up. Like I mentioned, the HDRI's in there. And for the material itself, this is one thing a lot of people asked about. Since I wanted to have this gradual change over time, I set up this cool little material that was basically a color ramp that showed the whole gradient I wanted to use. And then what I did is basically I started with black, added I guess 0.028 times 36 is probably 1. Yes, exactly. So I had that and then I multiplied that number by whatever day it was, which allowed me to keep that consistency. You can see if I slide this all the way back, it'll start to match all those colors that were in the project. If I start at 1, for the first day, we've got essentially what we see down here with the A, kind of a pink color. And then I was able to just kind of add per day. So I didn't even really have to figure much out until we ended up with the yellow that was the numbers portion of the project towards the end. But that's about it. There's also, I don't know if I showed yet, there's some animation built in here. So the cube was rotating every post. That was automatically rotating in my starter file. Again, nice little detail that's in there that I don't have to touch every time. I just have to move it to wherever it needs to go and then it's good to go. So there's also a couple of cameras. If you look at these posts, each one individually would start with sort of a panning shot and then one that showed the number kind of in its proper side view so you could see that yes, that is a 2. So I have this first camera set up and each animation was about 10 seconds long. So I've got some markers down here where it starts off one camera and then it would switch to the second camera. And sometimes I flip-flop those depending on how I was feeling. But again, lighting very simple. Just had one big lamp in the background here. In some of the posts, I would put lamps like inside the building or something like that. But for the most part, it's just, this spot lamp could be, one that goes inside. But this point lamp back here, a big backdrop, and then an HDRI kind of lighting it. And this HDRI is from HDRI Haven. You can go check that out. Highly recommended. Good one. I think it's called Misty Pines. That's about it. Just wanted to show you sort of the details that go inside a file like this and basically kind of where I was starting each day and how I was able to open this file, get right to work on the design and not think about anything in regards to materials, anything like that. It's just all ready to go. So that's all from me. I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. I know it's not the typical type of video I would make, but I just thought it would be a good idea to maybe just share my thoughts around something. I know with the 36 Days of Type project coming up, many of you are probably thinking, oh, is this something I should try? Is this something I'm not ready for? That choice is up to you, but I just wanted to share some of my little tips and tricks about what's worked for me in the past and why I think that doing a daily project really is a pretty good thing and I would encourage you to give it a shot. So thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe to this channel. You probably already know that that's how YouTube works, but yeah, I really appreciate you watching. Definitely give me a follow on Instagram. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to do the 36 Days of Type project this year, but definitely stay tuned and you'll know if I do because I'll start going with it and hopefully I can make it through all 36 days. I've been referring to my architecture one because the previous year I only got through 9 days and that's okay too. It's still a daily project even if I think as long as you do it for maybe 2 days you can call it a daily project. So don't be afraid if you can't keep up all the way. And of course, feel free to just pop in, do a couple letters here and there. You don't have to do the whole thing, but if you think you can do it, if you think you've got time, you're up for a challenge, I would definitely encourage doing it. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll be looking forward to seeing your daily posts. Thank you so much for watching.